This podcast is sponsored by Talkspace. You know when you're really stressed or not feeling so great about your life or about yourself? Talking to someone who understands can really help. But who is that person? How do you find them? Where do you even start? Talkspace. Talkspace makes it easy to get the support you need. With Talkspace, you can go online, answer a few questions about your preferences, and be matched with a therapist. And because you'll meet your therapist online, you don't have to take time off work or arrange childcare. You'll meet on your schedule, wherever you feel most at ease. If you're depressed, stressed, struggling with a relationship, or if you want some counseling for you and your partner, or just need a little extra one-on-one support, Talkspace is here for you. Plus, Talkspace works with most major insurers, and most insured members have a $0 copay. No insurance? No problem. Now get $80 off of your first month with promo code SPACE80 when you go to Talkspace.com. Match with a licensed therapist today at Talkspace.com. Save $80 with code SPACE80 at Talkspace.com.
This is a mini meditation guided by Bombas. Repeat after me. I'm comfy. I'm cozy. I have 0 blisters on my toes. And that's because I wear Bombas, the softest socks, underwear, and t-shirts that give back. One purchased equals one donated. Now go to bombas.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY for 20% off your first purchase. That's BOMBAS.com/Wondery and use code WONDERY at checkout.
You know where your business would be without you. Imagine where it could go with more of you. Well, with Wix, you can create a website with more of your vision, your voice, your expertise. Wix gives you the freedom to truly own your brand and do it on your own. With full customization and advanced AI tools that help turn your ideas into reality. Scale up without being held back by cookie-cutter solutions and grow your business into your online brand. Because without you, your business is just business as usual. Take control. Go to Wix.com.
If your 2020 or newer car or truck bought or leased from a California dealer has been in for repairs under warranty, listen up. Don't let the dealership give you the runaround. With Lemon Law Help, you won't be with. Lemon Law Help specializes in lemon law and has recovered millions for car owners just like you. With a reputation for big wins, they fight for your rights. Best of all, you'll pay 0 out of pocket. Call 877-294-1717 today for a free evaluation or visit lemonlawhelp.com.
Paid spokesperson. Every case is different. Results vary. Courtesy of Roger Kiernos, Knight Law Group, LLP.
Welcome to the Media Roundtable. I'm Dan Granger, CEO of Oxford Road and Veritone One. And something we always say on this show is influence responsibly, and that we want you to not just succeed in audio, but to use your influence for good. And it's for that reason that I'm really excited to tell you about something we're participating in today. As you're listening to this, we are a part of the 3rd annual Podcasthon. With over 1,000 podcasts highlighting charities worldwide. The charity that we want to sponsor is not actually technically a 501c3. It's an initiative that's very close to our hearts that raises money for a charity, and that charity is Children's Hospital of Los Angeles. Our initiative is called the Koala Corps, and the mission of the Koala Corps is to ensure that every child at Children's Hospital Los Angeles receives the comfort of human touch, especially when the family can't be present. Just a little story about me, if you haven't heard this before. Our youngest daughter, Shay, she's great, and she's 18 now, but she's been in and out of Children's Hospital her whole life, and we spent about the first 6 months of her life basically living at Children's Hospital. One of the biggest problems we saw, not just for us, but for all of the patients, was that families are not able to be bedside. And sometimes you're dealing with really young kids, infants in a bed who are facing a life-threatening illness, and parents are either working or gone for whatever reason, single parents that can't be there all the time. There are so many small children who need love and comfort, and as great as the nurses and the doctors and the staff are, they just can't be with them all the time. Well, what we learned was there are enough people that want to volunteer for what they call their cuddler program and come in and hold these babies. The problem is they didn't have the resources to have anyone run that department to actually facilitate and manage and train and screen and schedule all of the volunteers. And so we made it our mission to solve that problem. We've been raising funds for the Koala Corps for years now, and the company's really gotten behind it and tied it to our objectives so that the better we do as a company, the more we can give to this cause. And as a result of it, it would blow your mind. We've gone from really a small fraction of children that are eligible getting someone to hold them to we're almost at capacity in terms of the amount of active volunteers. It's been a wonderful thing, and we need your help to keep it going. So if this resonates to you, please go to koalacorps.com. That's spelled KOALACORPS.com to learn more and hopefully to donate. And if you're interested in discovering hundreds of other incredible charities, go to podcasthon.org. Thanks for joining us and for using your influence for good. Now let's dive into this week's industry edition.
Welcome to the Media Roundtable Industry Edition, where we dive into the secrets of the craft and provide our perspective on industry topics in service of marketers responsible for the success of their audio programs. We call them the Chief Audio Officers. I'm your host, James Ingrassia, EVP of Client Service here at Oxford Road. Today we are joined by our fellow agents of influence. First up, we've got fellow James Cridland. He is the editor of my favorite newsletter that I wake up to every morning, Podnews, and the Podcast Business Journal, and is a radio futurologist. James, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
We also have Neal, Lucey, EVP of Strategy and Product here at Oxford Road. Hi, Neal.
Hello.
We have Spencer Semonson, Media Supervisor at Oxford Road. Hi, Spencer. And last but definitely not least, we have Courtney O'Connor, Director of Podcast Media at Veritone One. And Courtney is making her debut on the Media Roundtable. So everyone, please welcome Courtney.
Thanks for having me.
Anytime. All right, let's get to the show. Let's break down first a few of this week's quick industry news stories. We are going to start with something about Michelle Obama. Spencer, why don't you tell us about it?
Yes, Michelle Obama is launching, I wouldn't say the third iteration, but the third podcast through Higher Learning, which is a production company through Spotify. This one she's co-hosting with her brother, Craig Robinson, who is actually doing most of the reads. The show came out March 12th and has advertisements in it from brands like Rivian, Pine Sol, and Theraflu. What is the so what for CAOs? What is this teaching us about video, about celeb podcasts? What do we think about this?
I mean, I'll go first. I think that it's so interesting when celebrities launch podcasts because I think there's this perception that they're going to be huge and they're going to garner these massive audiences. But I think like same rules apply for any podcast. Is just because Michelle Obama is doing it, the content has to be interesting to actually gain an audience. And so from our perspective of we like need these shows to kind of walk before they run and ensure that they're coming out with realistic projections and let the advertisers that are buying in first gain the value of growing with the show because it takes time to get momentum. And we know that first episode is going to have this huge pop because it's big names. And then we're going to see a pretty big downturn. But I think, the content seems very interesting. It sounds cool. It sounds engaging, but we never know until, fourth, fifth episode what that audience actually really looks like.
Yeah, I've spotted a couple of things with this. Firstly, interestingly, it's using the same feed as the Lite podcast, which was a previous show that she did and then was put onto Open RSS. I think it was an Audible exclusive at first. So it starts with some audience already, which is a great tip, I think, to reuse your audience from older projects. And also for chief audio officers, worthwhile bearing in mind that if you put your stuff on YouTube, then everyone can see your numbers. And some of the right-leaning press have, unsurprisingly, panned her YouTube numbers. They were at 206,000 when I looked on Friday, which I think is pretty good for a launch show. But it's just worth remembering that unlike your normal podcast figures, all YouTube numbers are public, whether you like them or not. So if you're launching something on YouTube, your success or not is out there as well.
Thank you. Thank you for that. I would have to agree. Let's see if she can keep the content going past episode number 1. We've had a few false starts here, but maybe this is the one that finally does the trick. All right, let's stay on the subject of people and podcasting for a while. Neal, tell us about Bill Simmons and Spotify. I know there's been a lot of back and forth there. Where did we land?
Yeah, so Bill Simmons has renewed with Spotify. It's at least for 2 more years, and it's keeping him as the head of talk strategy and the host of his podcast, and keeping all of the Ringers podcasts in the fold of Spotify. I thought it was interesting because there was a lot of speculation that Bill Simmons might be walking away from Spotify. I think there was, he hasn't really embraced their video from what I can understand. Like, he's stuck with YouTube. So I think there might have been a little bit of surprise that he is renewed with Spotify. And I think on the other side of the equation with Spotify, they've been very cautious about renewing big deals. I mean, they obviously renewed with Joe Rogan, but they've taken a more cautious approach. So they must clearly see value in keeping the Ringer and keeping Bill Simmons a part of the Spotify family.
Yeah, I mean, he was one of the execs at the company. So he was head of podcast monetization and innovation. The company's press release was interesting because it says he will remain at Spotify as head of talk strategy. Well, that's not what his job title was. That's a brand new job title. And one of the things that we reported in the Podnews newsletter way back in November the 29th, 2 weeks after Spotify launched video in a blaze of glory in LA, Bill Simmons had not uploaded a single video to Spotify. And it took another week and a half for him to actually upload a video onto Spotify. December the 9th was the first one there. So if you're going to be head of podcast monetization and innovation, and you're going to ignore the innovation of video on Spotify and ignore the monetization that brings you, then that's an interesting story, I think. But great that he's clearly a talent. Great that he is still at Spotify. It's 5 years now since Spotify bought The Ringer, and it'll be good to see how he moves on. He's reporting to the new head of podcast business, who's a nice man called Roman Wassenmuller, who I had a coffee with in LA at the end of last year, and it seems a very bright guy who's been involved in the Spotify world for a long, long time. So, yeah, fun to see.
Well, that's probably why they changed his title to head of talk strategy. If he wasn't going to embrace it, someone else will. All right, well, let's stick on the subject of sports here. And guys, we have our very first sponsor to tell you about here. We have a live read. So let's go a little behind the curtain here. Here on the Media Roundtable, we are always advocating for best practices in podcasts. And one of those that we always say is save the live reads. Do your live reads baked in. If you're listening and you're part of a show, those get the most impact and the best performance. So we are going to practice what we preach. And following around Bill Simmons and sports, let's talk about All City Network. So sports fans, they don't just follow their teams, they live them, and All City Network gets that. They're redefining sports media, delivering daily podcasts, pregame, postgame shows. They have this community-driven coverage of diehard fans that you can't get anywhere else. They're pushing the boundaries on industry definition of podcasts, striking distribution deals with Roku, Samsung. They have live shows that are streamed on connected TVs in addition to live on YouTube. We talk about this all the time. Like, what is a podcast? Is it video? Is it audio? They're doing it all. If you're a brand, if you're a chief audio officer and you're looking to connect with passionate, engaged sports fans, All City is a community that converts. They offer a range of advertising and sponsorship opportunities, from turnkey mid-rolls to custom brand integrations, tentpole ownerships, you name it. And for example, next month in April, they're going to have 125 plus dedicated shows just for the NFL draft. Team by team coverage of your favorite teams in the NFL. So if you are a CEO or audio decision maker looking for a smarter way to reach sports fans, All City is a strong opinion that has delivered results for several of our clients here at the agency, and they can do wonders for you too. So to open a conversation, email them at advertising@allcitynetwork.com. That's advertising@allcitynetwork, all one word, .com. All right, let's move on to our main stories. Neal, you are back up to talk about YouTube, which is all the rage. What are you hearing?
We can't get away from YouTube, can we? I don't think. There's a billion viewers. What else? What's coming next week? Who knows? So YouTube is debuting a new Lite subscription offer, which will include podcasts, creator content, non-music content. So going to offer ad-free access to podcasts and other non-music content at a really good price, $8, compared to the standard of $14 for YouTube Premium. So the move is really aimed at users who want an ad-free experience but don't need the music services. Lite users will still see ads on music videos and music content and shorts. In addition to that, YouTube announced that its service has reached 125 million subscribers. So the company is testing new features. One of the features that they're testing, which I found, was a 4x video playback. So you can watch your video at 4x speed. So I can't do that.
I can't even do 2x, but yeah. Sorry, go ahead.
So let's see. YouTube is already the leading platform for podcast consumption. Now they're at $8 a month for an ad-free version. I can get my creator content, my podcast, my how-tos, my makeup tutorials. I need my makeup tutorials, all ad-free. That's a pretty good deal, right? And I think for the podcast industry, it might be a bit of a wake-up call. We've seen, like, every time there's a benchmark report, ad loads keep increasing. We know some publishers really push the boundaries. So, there comes a point where it's just like, you're going to squeeze more ads into the experience. I'm going to go find an ad-free experience and I'll pay for it. We've seen it happen. We've seen it happen with television. So I think that's a wake-up call. And I think if the industry continues to push the boundaries on ad loads, YouTube could be the beneficiary in the long run.
I totally agree. I think, to chime in here, I think it actually doubles down on the power of baked in and embedded ad reads, because that's still going to be present. If a creator is choosing to advertise and bake that into a simulcast podcast, it'll still be on YouTube, and it'll have, I think, a stronger effect because those true views and those YouTube sold ads won't be there for those premium users. And also, it, I think, speaks a lot to what we're doing on the creator side of our business of working with influencers that are integrating in their how-to videos advertisers. So for those decision makers, YouTube is a really strong place to be because they typically only have one advertiser. And yes, they come with a premium cost, but you're getting 100% share of voice, which is unheard of in really anything anymore. And so I think while it's eye-opening and something that us chief audio officers have to keep pushing for, of making sure those ad loads stay decent and stay under a certain level, I think it's also positive for baked in advertising, YouTube integrations, because they'll hold a stronger value with these premium users.
I also think this might force the subject of what is a podcast, because you're already paying $18 for YouTube Premium to get rid of the ads, but this is just for podcasts and other creator content. Who decides where that line is on what you're watching?
Well, so in terms of YouTube, this is essentially built for people who have Spotify, who like Spotify in terms of music, but would also like to get rid of the ads in YouTube as well. So it gets rid of the ads for everything apart from music, which makes perfect sense. I think it's interesting. Neal said that YouTube was the number one for podcast consumption. And I'm just going to say, it's not. It's number one for people using that app as a podcast app. It's not necessarily number one for total time spent with podcasting. And I think we just need to be quite careful in terms of how we talk about YouTube being number one, because it's number one for people, but it may not be number one for time spent. A little plug for the Edison Research Infinite Dial, which is Thursday, 2:00. It's a free webinar. There may be some more numbers in there about YouTube. Just saying. I happen to be co-hosting the Infinite Dial this time round, so looking forward to that. But yeah, but I think it's fascinating. YouTube just trying something new. They're trying this premium Lite subscription. It's only available, I think, in 4 countries. The US is one of them. Here in Australia is another. And then there's a couple of countries in Asia, I think Indonesia and Malaysia from memory, but I may be entirely wrong. So they are trying this. They're seeing what happens. The only other thing that I would say is if you are going to be spending $8.99, what does that mean for the people who aren't spending that money, who are seeing the ads? Is there an argument to say that the baked-in ads, as Courtney was saying, are even more valuable? Because actually anybody that can afford it will now just be getting rid of the ads anyway. So who are you actually advertising to on YouTube? Are you advertising to people that can't afford to get rid of the ads? And in which case, is that really a set of people who you really want to reach? So there's a question mark there, I think.
Yeah, this is definitely going to evolve, and I'm sure there'll be a lot of POVs in this in the coming months. All right, well, how about we switch to YouTube? Let's talk about YouTube. Again, YouTube's biggest stars are all about podcasting, but they want Emmy recognition now. So just last week at South by Southwest, live taping of the Variety Awards Circuit podcast, a few of the top YouTube creators like Hot Ones, Sean Evans, Rhett and Link from Good Mythical Morning, and Marquez Brown Lee from Waveform, they all discussed how they got started, their careers, and they all unanimously pushed for Emmy recognition, which I think is really interesting because if the late night show is going to have a category about best variety show, or reality show is going to have that best category, why shouldn't podcasters? But there's a lot of challenges about sustaining that success. Like just because you're popular right now doesn't mean next year you're going to be popular. They stress the need for passion over fame. They said that there's a disconnect between online influence and industry awards. And they really want those digital creators to get that equal recognition alongside the traditional media. I had a POV on this last time this came up 6 months ago. I think that they definitely deserve some kind of recognition. I just don't know that it's an Emmy award. I don't know. Emmy to me is TV. And I don't hear everyone saying it's podcasting TV. That's not really it. I don't think it's also Oscars, and it's not Grammys. I don't know where it falls. Maybe it's its own category. But my take here is that the big podcasters, yes, they should be recognized. I'm just not convinced it's the Emmy Awards as they're pushing for. Maybe it's the closest thing. But anyone have any thoughts on this?
I think the reason why they're pushing so far into Emmys is there's already an Emmy for like best content and best limited series. So technically there's precedent. And then all the other awards that exist technically for online influencers and video creators are just extremely juvenile in the way that they're handled, the way that they're marketed, the people who are up for the awards. I mean, to your point, we're having the same kind of conversations about emerging media in the past, and look where we've come. We didn't used to give Emmys for things that were on Netflix, and now they're one of the leading entities with Emmy Awards every year. And we have, movies that came out on streamers that are up for Oscars. So I don't think it's unprecedented. And I think it also shows that YouTube is not one thing. It's not the bottom floor of VidCon that's basically a bunch of kids running around. It's somewhere in the middle where there's just because it's a free platform doesn't mean that all the content on it feels free or doesn't take an extreme amount of time. And there's whole documentaries on there that run the scope of crazy niche interests that deserve a bit more recognition. To your point, does an Emmy make the most sense? Almost no, because it's its own thing. But does it deserve something more adult? 100%.
Yeah, I think it's very interesting in that maybe 5-10 years from now, there'll be like a podcast union, or maybe there'll be some industry that stands up and kind of protects them. Because I'm even thinking here, this is YouTube stars talking about this. What about, would there be an audio only category in this awards? There's so many different ways to slice it. But if you're listening and you're entrepreneurial, maybe you should start up an awards show for these guys. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Emmy eventually follows what's happening and what consumers are interested in, right? So I don't know that, like what to Spencer's point, Netflix didn't, I think, used to be included in the Emmy Awards, and now, like, you look at the platforms that are winning the most Emmy Awards, it's Max, it's
Amazon,
it's Netflix, it's Amazon. Well, it's not so much Amazon actually.
Not sure, Hulu.
But it's more so the streaming platforms and the traditional TV broadcasters. So, I think that eventually the Emmys may catch up to what's happening with the consumers. It may take a while, but I wouldn't be surprised if sometime down the road that you do see it for creators included.
Well, let's get off of YouTube, but we're still going to talk about video because that's what we do here, lately at least. Courtney, tell us about Wondery and how it's evolving.
Yes, video is all the rage today, and I think in the industry right now. But Wondery is going all in on podcasts. They're tapping into audiences for visual content. So they've rolled out a free ad-supported streaming TV channel on Amazon Prime's Video Live TV and YouTube. And then they're keeping premium video content exclusive to Wondery Plus subscribers. With a massive 20 million YouTube followers, they're cashing in on ads, everything from product placement to dynamic ad inventory. They're also getting creative with immersive visuals for narrative podcasts like their new series Redacted. So by blending video and storytelling with fresh ad strategies, Wondery is continue to push boundaries. I think it's super interesting because Wondery has kind of been ahead of the curve and kind of behind the curve in many ways, but they were the first that, crossed the boundary of podcast to TV series. And that was super interesting with the Dr. Death and the Dirty John series. So Wondery continuing to evolve is very interesting. We always say meet the consumers where they are. And Wondery continuing to make this push, I think, again, just shows the industry's evolution and push towards evolving content and the way that we're delivering it. Anybody have a take on this too?
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. And there's a bunch actually of podcast companies who are doing this sort of thing. So Wondery, I think, launched their first fast channel about a year or so ago, but are launching more as we go. Evergreen just announced that they've got a fast channel which contains some of their podcasts, but also some live sport as well, because they happen to have rights for live sport. And I think the Locked On Network has launched a fast channel too. So I suspect that we will see more of those. If you're making a ton of video content, then why wouldn't you launch an additional channel on things like Amazon TV and other platforms as well? So I think it makes a bunch of sense.
I also think the immersive visual aspect is interesting too. I think, those involved in this space know that there's different types of video assets, and we usually think of video as being like host on screen, but Wondery rolling out this kind of, I don't want to devalue it by saying cartoon, but this like illustration of the experience is also very interesting. And it kind of, again, just continues to evolve the way we think of video in podcasting.
Oh, thank you. Makes a lot of sense there. All right, let's move on. James Cridland. We're going to talk about a very big name in podcasting, Ben Shapiro, and he's got a new sidekick. Tell us all about it.
He does, James. Yes. It's really interesting. This. So he's essentially got a new advertising client, and that company is Perplexity, the AI tool. Of course, if you've ever consumed a Ben Shapiro show, you'll know that Ben Shapiro is there, always looking for reasons and stuff to back up his thoughts. And of course, what better to back up your thoughts than an AI tool? So what they've done is when Ben Shapiro makes a point, he will then say, well, let's ask our friends at Perplexity whether or not I'm right, and goes off to Perplexity, asks a question, and hey, presto, gets something back saying that he's absolutely correct and that we should never doubt anything that Ben Shapiro says. So that's a lovely thing. I found it really interesting. I mean, there's an example in the release that they sent over, and it's quite flawless in terms of how he gets the mentions of this tool into the show. Really good advertising. And I think, for any audio officer out there, I think it's just a really clever match between a product and a podcast. What Perplexity will do is it'll do tons of research. Shapiro wants that independent research to back up his viewpoints, and I think it works really well. The only question that I would have, and actually a question that I've put to them, is how much this follows the FTC's rules about just making it clear that they're advertising. I think saying our friends at Perplexity isn't necessarily as clear as it might be. So I have a question with them. Doubtless I'll find an answer, but that's where we are. But I think it's a really, really bright idea.
Neal, do you have thoughts here?
I do. I mean, I think it's a really smart idea of him as well. And I mean, and a really, really smart idea for Perplexity AI to get that ad placement in front of his audience, right? So I think for both parties, it's a win-win. I think there's no question that, there are advertisers that are worried about conservative content. I mean, let's face it, the conservative content gets the most scrutiny amongst advertisers in terms of whether to advertise or not advertise. And for him to have, basically a live fact checker, so using a fact checker, using Perplexity as a fact checker, you can't, he's not telling untruths, right? So you might disagree with what he's saying, but it's based in facts. There's a factual basis for what he's saying. So I think it's important. I mean, I think it's interesting. I think for him, I think it's a really smart play.
Yeah, just to add here, I was actually on stage at South by Southwest with their SVP of ad revenue over at Daily Wire when this news was released. And we actually got a question from the audience, and it was more of a statement of accusing Daily Wire and Ben specifically of being storytellers versus news reporters. And I think that this kind of helps eliminate that question. And to your point, Neal, maybe helps break down those barriers of concern with advertisers of aligning with storytelling content, quote unquote, versus actual factual news.
Well, good points. I mean, and then I'm sure people will point to like, well, who's feeding the Perplexity engine, and is it factual? But those are stories that I'm sure will emerge as this gets used a little bit more frequently. Last story comes from Spencer, who has something that she read about how podcasters should not be cutting their spend in light of all this economic turmoil. Spencer, take it away.
Yes, from Podcast Daily News, we have a new article. So buyers are saying that podcast ads are less prone to cuts than the tariffs might suggest. The implementation of tariffs from U.S. President Trump encourages business investments, has caused unease among business leaders, and this concern could extend to the advertising industry. But a survey by the Interactive Advertising Bureau, or the IAB, reveals that 94% of U.S. advertising decision makers are concerned about the impact of tariffs on ad spending. While traditional media is expected to see the biggest cuts, digital audio, including podcast ads, is better positioned, with only 16% of buyers predicting reductions. Advertising budgets are expected to decline by 6 to 10%, with retail, consumer electronics, and media sectors most affected. But buyers anticipate a shift towards performance-based campaigns and digital channels. Tariff-related budget cuts are expected to be most noticeable in Q2 and Q3, with 21% expecting more flexible negotiations. Now, how much do I believe that is true? I'm not sure, as every prediction I've ever come up with in my entire life has been wrong. For CEOs who are looking to be put in the right direction and alleviated their fears, what can we say to them about this article and its validity and how we feel about the future? Any thoughts?
I mean, I would add that, in times of economic uncertainty, there is a saying out there that when the economy sneezes, the advertising industry catches cold. The economy seems to be sneezing, at least in the United States. So, it wouldn't be surprising at all if advertisers are pulling back spend, and will pull back spend just because they're not sure what's going to happen. And marketers, as much as, they, I think, believe in advertising, and as much as it's been proven out that it works if you maintain advertising during a recession, it's an area that businesses can cut fairly easily. And it's often a line item that's first to go. The beneficiary of it, though, in advertising would be on the performance-based channels. And podcasting is proven out as a performance driver. It does great at building brand, but it's a proven performance driver. So I think that there's sense in protecting the podcast budgets, just given the performance that it does drive for advertisers.
That's a great point. I mean, I've been in the industry for about 5 years, right? And I was through the first part of COVID, the recessions, everyone quitting, these eras that we've all been through. And through it all, podcast advertising has only steadily grown, and influencer marketing has only grown. And to your point, it really is that endorsement where somebody feels that they have loyalty more to the person than they do to a brand. And I've seen so many times, you can see it in simulcasts in the comment section and YouTube, where they say, I bought this thing just because you told me to, or like, I'm showing my allegiance to you by purchasing this, and brands take notice of that time and time again. And that's just so much more influential than your marketing budget's put somewhere that's more in legacy media.
Yeah, I think it's very clear that no one likes uncertainty. And what we're currently seeing right now is clear uncertainty into what the future might hold from an economic point of view. I speak as somebody who lives in Australia, and and obviously we're seeing tariffs and things happen here as well. The one thing that you can, though, say with certainty is if you cut your advertising, fewer people will buy your stuff. That is an absolute certainty. And so it's always surprised me. I understand why, but it's always surprised me why a chief audio officer, the first thing that they would do if they don't know what's going to happen is to cut their advertising. Surely the first thing that they should be doing to protect their business is to not just continue their advertising, but actually invest more in that, because that is one surefire way of actually making sure that more people buy your stuff. And at the end of the day, that's what we all need.
James, I think that's such a good point that like the first budgets that are cut are always marketing budgets. But then you're cutting your revenue and your sales too. And I think to everyone's point here, audio has data to prove and direct response has data to prove that we are turning over those ad dollars and we are providing ROI. And so I think it's just like looking at the data, we all saw it happen in 2020. And I don't think any of us want to make predictions here, but if the same thing happens, the ecosystem saw a huge boom because of how much direct response we get. And we can see the revenue that we're providing for.
And you also have to invest now to get results later. I mean, I was looking in my spare time through one of our clients' survey results and through the write-ins, and I found 2 write-ins that said, this is from 2 weeks ago, a news podcast like 10 years ago is what one of them put as when they filled it in. And the other one said a basement yard podcast many, many years ago. So while those are maybe the exceptions to the rule, it does stick in consumers' minds, as you were saying, like brands and always talking about the products.
So a couple of weeks ago, I needed to buy a new oven, and I don't listen to very much commercial radio here in Australia. I literally had no idea where to buy an oven. I had no idea who sold them because, I only moved here 9 years ago. No idea who sold them. And I asked my wife, who is Australian, and she sang a radio jingle to me from 30 years ago. And I went to the good guys and I bought my oven. Audio advertising works, folks. It's amazing though it is.
It absolutely does. The good guys. Love that. All right, guys. Well, we did it. Thanks to our team for taking part in this important conversation. And thank you, the listener or viewer, for joining the Media Roundtable. This podcast is brought to you by Oxford Road and Veritone One, where we want you to succeed in audio and creator-based media to use influence for good. As members of the marketing community, we have the power to advance voices that don't just entertain, but they edify, to build bridges across differences and preserve fair-minded discussion around the most important topics of our age. And if you're a marketer and you're looking to align your brand values with extraordinary business outcomes like we were just talking about, reach us by visiting oxfordroad.com and subscribe to our weekly newsletter, The Influencer. We'd love to hear from you here at the Media Roundtable. If you have any feedback or suggestions, don't hesitate to reach out to us at info@mediaroundtable.com. And as James was just mentioning, the importance of sonic logos and sonic brandings, well, we have a whole podcast about that. It's called Ad Infinitum. It is hosted by Stu Redwine, our VP of Creative Services. So if you're really into audio and you want to hear all the latest work and critiques on the latest audio ads, all about podcasting, streaming, SiriusXM, you name it, it's called Ad Infinitum, and it's released on this feed as well as on its own feed. So just search up Ad Infinitum Podcasts. Thank you to our guests.
This new year, why not let Audible expand your life by listening? Explore over 1 million audiobooks, podcasts, and exclusive Audible originals that'll inspire and motivate you. Tap into your well-being with advice and insight from leading professionals and experts on better health, relationships, career, finance, investing, and more. Maybe you want to kick a bad habit or start a good one. If you're interested in learning how to master your emotions and hearing scientifically backed advice for using your emotions as a tool, may I suggest Shift by psychologist and bestseller author Dr. Ethan Kross? Trust me, listening on Audible can help you reach the goals you set for yourself. Start listening today when you sign up for a free 30-day trial at audible.com/Wondery. That's audible.com/Wondery.
Courtney, Spencer, James, Neal, and to Haley, Ruby, Bianca, Kyle, Ezra, Mary Jane, Everett, Neal again, and the team at Podcast One, as always, influence responsibly.
Well, this hereby concludes another great edition of the Media Roundtable podcast, and it is our special Podcasthon episode. If our mission resonates with you, please visit koalacorps.com to learn more to donate. That is spelled KOALACORPS.com, and discover hundreds of other incredible charities at Podcasthon. That is spelled PODCASTHON.org. Thanks for joining us on the Media Roundtable and for using your influence for good. And of course, influence responsibly.
What's the difference between DIY and doing it yourself? It's the difference between a part-time passion and a full-time business. Wix gives you the power to turn your passion into a moneymaker with a website that fits your unique vision and the business tools you need to succeed. Let your ideas flow with AI that guides you, but keeps you in the driver's seat. Manage your business from one dashboard and keep it growing with built-in marketing features. It's time to turn your daydream into your dream job. Do it yourself. Go to Wix.com.
If your 2020 or newer car or truck bought or leased from a California dealer has been in for repairs under warranty, listen up. Don't let the dealership give you the runaround. With Lemon Law help, you won't be with. Lemon Law Help specializes in lemon law and has recovered millions for car owners just like you. With a reputation for big wins, they fight for your rights. Best of all, you'll pay zero out of pocket. Call 877-294-1717 today for a free evaluation or visit lemonlawhelp.com.
Paid spokesperson. Every case is different. Results vary. Courtesy of Roger Kiernos, Knight Law Group, LLP.